Now, let's go back and get a little bit more on the hearing. What have we been listening to? What have we heard from Robert Cook and Gary Gensler? For that, we bring in Bloomberg Sonali Basak, who covers Wall Street for us. And for one thing, Sonali, I've noticed Gensler is so new to this job that his almost every answer includes, I've got to check on the rules. I'm not 100% sure about the law. I need to talk to my staff. It strikes me, though, that these rules must be incredibly complicated if Gary Gensler has to check on so many things. It must be very difficult for companies to do business in this economy.
It's so funny you mentioned that, because the biggest concern I have among my sources is that when you look at the SEC and the CFTC and FINRA and really the alphabet soup of regulatory bodies out there, that there is a bit of an arbitrage, and it really gets difficult to set rules around family offices, which he was asked about, around short selling, which he was asked about, and cryptocurrencies. So he was fairly explicit in what he can and can't do. He asked Congress, for example, to take a look at cryptocurrencies and especially crypto exchanges, around the disclosures and around investor protections that exist, saying that the market can really benefit from that. He also said when it comes to family offices that they really don't have a lot of purview over them, which is so interesting, Matt, because, you know, just weeks ago, we had Morgan Stanley CEO James Gorman saying that that was an area that certainly needs more transparency, especially after this Archegos blow-up that we had. He did say a few actionable things. He said his staff was working on a report about what happened in January around those Gamestop pickups, something that we can expect this summer. He also said that he's asking staff to review market making and brokerage concentration. So think Citadel Securities. That industry will definitely be getting a closer look under this current SEC. And you can be sure that when we hear from Gary Gensler, there's going to be, there were very explicit concerns around payment for order flow and the relationships that the brokerages have with their wholesalers.
Yeah, really fascinating stuff. And he wants to basically provide more transparency. That's what we heard from both of them, especially in terms of short selling. But I just think it's so interesting that, you know, for someone who to Wharton, worked at Goldman Sachs, worked at the Department of Treasury, ran the CFTC, and is a professor at MIT Sloan School of Management. If he has to double check on the rules so much, it's got to make your job as a compliance officer very difficult.
It's not even double checking the rules. I mean, the words that he had said was that he has to use the power that Congress has given him, which means he's hamstrung in some of these areas, right? The SEC simply can't fix all your problems. So, you know, the thing is, I think what's interesting, this was not a GameStop hearing, Matt. This was a Gary Gensler hearing. Let's be absolutely clear. He's been asked to talk about climate change, about forced arbitration among financial firms and companies at large. Those are well beyond what happened in January. And you're hearing a push about social media, the way that the SEC can start to get into big technology. He's not going to be able to do that alone. But we've known that financial regulators have not, for many years, been able to get their acts together when it comes to collaboration. So let's see if, you know, Washington on this front can, you know, put things aside and work together when it comes to reforms that the industry is actually looking for. One quick note, Matt, is that, you know, Citadel Securities actually put out a white paper on Monday on this with proposals for the SEC, one of them being more disclosure around PFOF.
I feel like Wall Street working together is probably, you have a better chance of that than Washington working together. But I admire the optimism. I do think also that he did an incredibly good job of dealing with the questions. Often people in Congress don't know exactly what they're talking about, and it can be, I'm sure, very frustrating for an expert in these areas. He was incredibly congenial, incredibly collaborative. He's clearly worked with many of these officials before, and they seem to like him.
Yeah, so certainly what he said a lot. Nice to work with you again. You know, when Carolyn Maloney was saying that, really harkened back to his days after 2008 when he was in charge of the SEC, right? Very meaningful changes there. When it comes to the industry, you know, we're talking about Washington collaboration. Wall Street is certainly looking for better collaboration when it comes to these new rule sets, and it certainly looks like there will be new rule sets. I've got to say, the SEC moves slowly, Matt, usually. And for him to already say by this summer, you'll hear from us more, is a sea change.